Hey Ecofictologists! My name is Lovis and today I want to review a book I just finished called American War by Omar El Akkad, and I'll show it to you here. Now, if you've done any kind of research into clifi or ecofiction, this book has probably popped up on your radar. It did for me several times, so when I saw the audiobook listed at my local library, I said, yes please. Which is also why, if I mispronounce the author's name terribly, I apologize, but I'm gonna blame the narrator because I copied him. I had a lot of feelings about this book, so let's get into it. The story takes place in a near-future United States where climate change and sea level rise have ravaged the landscape. The sea is encroaching on the land and it's pushing people northwards. It has wiped out the eastern seaboard, Florida is underwater, and the capital has had to be moved from Washington, D.C. to Columbus, Ohio. And then because the government thought, oh, I guess we better stop using fossil fuels, who'da thunk, they passed a law that banned the use of fossil fuels. The South did not like this very much, and a second civil war breaks out when they secede in protest. The story describes how the Second Civil War is fought and the effect that it has on the citizens that are experiencing these horrors. For the first half, we follow the story through the eyes of Surratt Chestnut, and we grow up with her during this time where she and her family, her mother, her brother, and her fraternal twin sister have to leave their home in Louisiana to avoid the battlefronts reaching them from Mexico, and they move to a refugee camp called Camp Patience. It is there that Surratt meets someone who teaches her to think the way that he does, who stokes the fires of her resentment and plants her firmly onto the path that is of most use to him, although she's more than willing. In an interview that he gave, Omar El Akkad said, "Surratt Chestnut is not someone who I want you to sympathize with, like, or apologize for. I just want you to understand how she gets to the place where she ends up. I was going for the idea that it's possible to understand why someone does something without taking their side." That should give you an indication of the really intense choices that are discussed in this book, and the reader really gets an idea of how mindsets are formed and how the events in a person's life influences the life that they live later on. The second half of the book is told from a different perspective, but if I tell you whose, it kind of spoils something, so I'm not going to. All I will say is that the two halves of the book are told from the perspectives that have the most to learn, the most to experience, and the most to gain from the narrative. This book is a great example of clifi, where climate change acts as an amplifier, a pressure that causes a domino effect in many other aspects of our lives. It is classified as clifi as it takes place in a time when all our fears over climate change have come to be, but the main plot and the emotions that the reader gets from it are more about politics, human interactions, human emotions, and the things that people will endure once their survival mode kicks in. It's also about pride, loyalty, and most of all, revenge. So while the majority of the story and the emotion is about something very human, very personal, and very political, it is set against the backdrop of America after climate change and sea level rise have ratcheted up the pressure, instigating the events that bring the country to the point they are at in 2074. Omar El Akkad himself, when he talks about why he wrote this book, says that he draws on his own experiences as a journalist covering the War on Terror. But he also chose to base it in Louisiana because he spent time there covering the effects of climate change and sea level rise, and said in an interview on Dragonfly.eco that he has little doubt that climate change and its impacts on everything from food production to migration patterns will be one of the primary drivers of war in the coming decades. Mirroring his career as a journalist, the author intersperses the story with government documents, newspaper clippings, and memoirs to help tell the story, which add a really interesting depth to it. It makes it feel very historical, and it makes you believe that you're reading events that actually happened. This adds another emotional layer because it increases the believability and it decreases this separation that you can have in your head about what is real and what is in the book and what can happen and what can't happen. These types of media are what we would use to corroborate a story or to gain context, and that is exactly the purpose that they serve in American War. And if you like immersive storytelling, this is for you. Omar El Akkad's writing style is often lyrically beautiful, and he can put together sentences that you're just like, wow, I never would have thought to liken those two things together, but they make perfect sense, and now I can see the scene perfectly, it's insane. Those were moments of magic, and sometimes I did just stop and bask in how beautiful they were. Other times his writing kind of makes you make this face. Oh. Because the same reason that some moments are magic because they're so clear, that clarity also makes other moments graphic and visceral, and you just kind of go, oh. And some of those scenes will stick with me for a very long time. I will say that the story starts a little slowly. I kind of had this feeling like, oh, it's going really slow. And then I looked back and actually quite a few big things had happened, but it felt really slow, probably because you are seeing it through the eyes of a 6-year-old. But I would say be patient, do not give up on this book. Get yourself past that first part, and then when things start picking up, you're going to be really glad that you had all of that foundation at the beginning. I will just put down some blanket warnings that this book provides evidence of what one human being can do to another human being, and because it's in the context of a civil war, I think you can guess what those things are. Some of these were almost a bit much for me, because Omar El Akkad's writing style is so graphic and so emotional that you feel everything, and you feel everything. But the book was fascinating. It blatantly says, climate change is real, climate change is coming, and we cannot continue to live the way we are. Things will change, society will change. How will it change? Can we use this book as a cautionary tale for a future that we really don't want? Nothing good can come from this kind of reaction. And these are exactly the kinds of emotions that dystopian clifi is supposed to evoke in you. They're supposed to incite some kind of behavioral change based on the fear of what might happen. I am afraid of this potential future. Pressure will be put on people, and it's up to us to decide how to react to that. Are we going to turn on each other? Are we going to push people and force them to move so that we have more space? Are we going to stick doggedly to destructive lifestyles because we can't accept that they are destructive? This kind of dystopian near future is very common in clifi, and I do hope that it has the intended effect and makes the reader kind of pull up short and go, hang on, I don't want that. An American War portrays a future that is still very avoidable. Omar El Akkad has a TED Talk on YouTube where he talks about this book and why he wrote it. He said he wanted to highlight that there is no foreign kind of suffering. We all react to injustice the same way, we just have the privilege to believe otherwise. So this TED Talk should give you a taste of the tone of much of the book, and just like the TED Talk, the book is fascinating, it's visceral, and it will make you feel something. And that's what good storytelling is supposed to do, right? It's supposed to make you feel something. Make you think about something in a new light, or make you come face to face with some of the biases that you didn't know you had. American War engages on a very emotional level to convey a very important message, and I'm really glad that I read it. I hope you have enjoyed my review of American War by Omar El Akkad. As always, I'm totally keen for book recommendations and book review requests, so pop your thoughts in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you like the content you're seeing, and I'll see you next week.